I was 2 years old, I got my very own bedroom, but it didn't have conventional wallpaper. Instead, the walls were covered with tapa cloth. That's the cloth made by beating the inner bark of the paper mulberry tree. It's very important in Tongan culture because it's used in a lot of ceremonies and often given as a gift. And this particular cloth, the one that was in my bedroom, was covered in traditional designs, what we call Kupesi designs, that were painted by my grandmother, my mother's mum, Emma Topeni. I grew up in this space. It was so warm and cozy, it was like a womb made of tapa cloth. And there was other elements that enhanced or increased that feeling. The ceiling was covered with a fine mat that my grandmother had woven from the leaves of the pandanus tree. And I was surrounded by Emma's creativity, but also by my mother's sulietes. The giant shade on the light bulb was actually made from a bassinet that my mum had woven from natural fibres for me and my older brother Monty to sleep in when we were babies. The designs on the tapa cloth in my room were of doves, lions, pine trees and the crest of the Tongan royal family. You'll see them over and over again on many old pieces of Tongan tapa cloth. Here is what the tapa cloth in my bedroom looks like. And here are some of the lions and doves that I've painted myself in recent years. Those old Kupesi designs and the grains and texture of the cloth soaked into my subconscious and filled my dreams. And while I lay there, growing up and getting lost in the designs, I'm sure my Tongan ancestors were rubbing their hands together making plans for me, because I truly believe that they wanted me to do what I'm doing right now in my life, painting on tapa cloth and taking the practice of Kupesi to the world. And I also believe that right now, the world could learn something from the simple, happy and resilient approach to life that the Tongan people have. Now let me show you some of the tapa works I have painted myself. You can see it takes the ancient practice of tapa painting and uses it to address issues faced by all of us, particularly women. I also collaborate with my mother, Sulieti Whimea Burrows, who grew up in a village of Whalewai in the Vava'u Island group in Tonga. And it's when Mum and I started collaborating that we began to seriously explore what we could do with Kupesi. The Kupesi is a stencil that is used for printing designs onto the bark cloth. Now I'm going to show you an example of a Kupesi my mother and I use in our work. This Kupesi design is amo amo kofe. Amo amo means to stroke or massage, and kofe means bamboo. This is symbolic of the traditional way the Tongan people use the bamboo sticks for healing. You can see the geometrical lines that symbolize the bamboo. This Kupesi is over 85 years old. It's from Vava'u, this particular one, and you can see it's made naturally. The designs on the front of this Kupesi are made from the midribs of the leaves of the coconut tree. They are sewn with coconut fibres. I think it's incredible. And this, the backing, is kaka, and that's also part of the coconut tree. The Tongan people call the coconut tree the tree of life. And when I turn it around, they use the Tongan pandanus flax. And to hold the backing together, I find this really fascinating. They've used here the laitutu, which is the unbeaten bark of the paper mulberry tree, as a thread. It's really incredible. The next step in the process is to lay the whetaaki, which is the plain tapa cloth, over the Kupesi and press down so the stencil really comes through. That's umea. That's a clay we have. It's beautiful. It lets out these gorgeous textures and tones. They sometimes use koka as well as the dye for rubbing, but we like to use umea. And this is from my mum's home village in Whalewai and Vava'u. And as you can see, the gorgeous richness of the Kupesi coming through. The geometrical lines. It really is an art piece in itself. Here are two works that Mum and I did for a recent exhibition at Salote in Auckland. This one is called TEDxNukualofa, but usually, and in this case too, we make the Kupesi designs the background and then paint over the top. This is how the work ended up. I painted on it a family made up of a mum, dad, grandmother, and 3 children during the COVID-19 pandemic wearing face masks. I painted this imagery because people all over the world have been wearing them. And this is capturing the time of now, 2020, 2021. The whole world is facing this pandemic. And it's capturing the history, which I believe is very important. We can do that through the art. So when future generations are to go back and have a look at what our lives were like, they will see these works. This is the work of 2020. And here is another ngātu painting. So ngātu also means it's tapa cloth, but it completed tapa cloth in the Tongan culture. This one is of a mother and child wearing face masks, and you can really see the kupesi coming through. It is so beautiful. It's just an artwork in itself. And we just, keeping the kupesi like that, naturally coming through the stencil, it's like the ancestors are coming with us. And I think that's a really important process. It's the completed piece. The Kupesi is a creative tradition that is exclusive to Tonga. No other Pacific culture uses the Kupesi stencil. We have our own patterns and we create new ones too. Tonga's Queen Salote Tupo III wrote, "Our history is written not in our books, but in our mats." She knew that it was the fine works of traditional art that carried the stories of her nation. Traditionally, the women would come together and make and decorate tapa cloth, weave fine mats and make jewellery and other pieces of craft and fine art. They would talanoa or talk, share their ideas, weave, stitch kupesi together, sing, learn from each other. They would cry, share stories, support each other and connect within a community environment. My mother experienced this as a child, and I experienced it when we both went to her home village in Whalewai. We worked with the women to make new kupesi based on our observations there, and they helped us decorate 2 large ngātu. What we hadn't realised was that before we arrived, no one had done any tapa art there for decades. It was an art form that had been lost in that little pocket of the world. After working with us, the people of Whalewai now grow paper mulberry trees to be made into tapa cloth, or what we call wheta aki. And we've even got the tapa cloth, the wheta aki from Whalewai, and we've used it in our works too. It really is truly amazing to stay connected from where we come from. In the old days, when the women would work together, there was a sense of communal connection and healing that took place. And this is what my mother and I experienced when we worked together on the tapa cloth. At an exhibition recently, a woman said to Mum how wonderful it was that the young people were able to recreate the old traditional designs by using computer programs, apps and 3D printing. Mum couldn't believe her ears and said, "That's not authentic art." Whether it is or isn't is a great subject for debate. I mean, I've got an example. My son, he's 13 years old and he plays the piano. He plays beautiful classical music that is hundreds of years old, but he also enjoys cutting up other people's music and putting new beats underneath it to create something new with this music software, like hip hop funk. So, I mean, what is authentic? That's a good question for you to decide. When our work is informed by the work of our ancestors, I wonder if it's not how we create that is important, but the reverence and respect with which we approach the task. I often feel that I'm collaborating with my ancestors and that they're guiding my hand. When I get into that zone, it feels like stuff comes out of the paintbrush that I never could have done by myself. I try to listen to what my blood is telling me and what my ancestors lined up behind me are saying. The crazy artists can hear that stuff and understand it. And we need to keep talking about it to everyone else so that more of you will start hearing it too. It's the wisdom of the old ones, and it doesn't matter if you experience it when you're 2 years old surrounded by tapa cloth or when you're an elderly person on your deathbed. The important thing is to start listening. What have you got to lose?